All right, people. So when I do these from my phone, commenters often observe that the quality is actually better than when I do it from my computer. Now, maybe that's because I'm just doing a pretty amateur setup on my computer, and the phone that I have is high quality. I don't know if that's how you perceive things. Let me know, and maybe I'll switch up my setup. If you'd like me to get more high quality video equipment, contributing financially would obviously be helpful for that. And I'd be happy to invest if I had sufficient resources. But if the quality is better on the phone, then for now, I guess that's a option that I'll utilize more. So let me know one way or another. Okay, so today is Super Tuesday, and I hate the term Super Tuesday because it's such like an invented cliche to give excitement to an election. So if we have to invent any cliche, I prefer Stupid Tuesday because it seems a little stupid to me that we should have this sequential primary process where states vote in a particular order. I think there is a certain logic to having the first four states vote in the way they do. So Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, because they're small to mid-sized states, candidates can actually go campaign there in a retail style way where they don't necessarily have to be mega rich in order to develop support bases. So it's not like California, New York, or Texas where you're essentially required to have a huge financial support base in order to really be in contention. So the Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina sequence doesn't really bother me. And in fact, I think it's possibly better than some of the alternatives, notwithstanding the botched caucus in Iowa this year. But then the logic kind of goes out the window of having a sequential primary process when all of a sudden we have this quote unquote Super Tuesday where you have enormous states, in fact, the biggest in the union, all voting on the same day. In particular, California and Texas. So I don't have any. Uh, I don't see the rationale in having states as big as California and Texas vote on the exact same day. We're still relatively early on in the primary process because we're going to have to deal with several more months, most likely, of primaries anyway. So why not have Texas on its own day in like April and then California on its own day in May or something like that? It seems rather ridiculous. So today we have Alabama, Arkansas, Colorado, California, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, and American Samoa. Keep an eye on American Samoa because if Tulsi's going to get a delegate anywhere, it's probably going to be in American Samoa. So, what's happening? Well, I might be wrong about this, and the data we have is incomplete. I'm just going to check to see if I can get my live stream. Uh, Sorry, I'm not getting my chats here. Let me actually see if I can pull it up on my computer and see if I can see your super chats. Give me one moment. Chat is disabled for this live stream. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Did not mean to disable the chat. Don't know why that's disabled. Uh, I'll see if I can fix that later. Okay, so what appears to be happening is what I think could be fairly described as the most rapid and dramatic shift in voter opinion in the context of a primary in recent political history, maybe ever. I don't know. It's hard to know with exactitude. But in the past 72 hours, Joe Biden has just gone up enormously. If you look at the betting markets, which are flawed, and you probably shouldn't even bother looking at them, but I, of course, do because I'm an addict, um, Joe Biden is up 24% in terms of his chances to win the nomination overall in just the past day. Bernie down 11%. So, according to the betting markets, which of course are flawed, are volatile, are a little wacky in their methodology, Biden up to 56% to win the nomination, Bernie down to 34%. So, take that with a grain of salt. I probably shouldn't have even reported it, frankly. But, it's something to at least keep a slightly suspicious eye on. And then, in the polling, Joe Biden has gone up relatively astronomically, given that it's such a short period of time for voter sentiment to be shifting as dramatically as it apparently is. So Biden is now once again the national leader in the morning consult poll, up, and he's up 17% in the morning consult poll in just 10 days. And I would imagine the bulk of that shift came post South Carolina. So there was some question as to whether Biden's unexpectedly large victory in South Carolina was happening too close to the Super Tuesday date to really be absorbed by the electorate and redound to his advantage. But maybe it's the perfect amount of time, because it means you can have this sort of establishment coalescence very quickly, and there's not a whole lot of time left to push back against it. There's no debate in between South Carolina and Super Tuesday. It's just a matter of 3 days. And the media that Biden is getting in these past 72 hours is just priceless. Now, he is getting a lot of money now for the first time, really. But the headlines and the news narratives that he's getting are just his dream scenario. And that culminated yesterday, I guess, with the coordinated collective action that was taken by Pete and Amy to drop out preemptively and endorse Biden. I also think it might be unprecedented to have such a concerted collaboration occur to boost one candidate in recent political history. I would have to go double check on that, but my initial impression is that has not really happened before. Remember, the Republicans, at least the Republican elites and the Republican-aligned media, or at least elements of it, drove themselves crazy in trying to figure out how they could take collective action to blunt the rise of Trump in 2016, and they couldn't do it. And the difference here, I think, or at least one of the key differences, which is why explains why the Democrats are able to do it, is because the Democratic voter, the median Democratic voter, as well as the Democratic-aligned media, they revere their party leaders. They idolize Obama, the Clintons, Biden, I guess you'd have to include in that. They idolize even some of the people with less stature, like Pete and Amy. They're loved. Even like John Kerry, who was a relatively early Biden endorser, former Democratic nominee, right? All these people are very much in good standing in the party. Whereas for the Republicans, there's a pattern where they sort of disown and denounce their past glorified party leaders. The Bushes being the most epic example, where Jeb couldn't get any traction, and even a late intervention by George W. ahead of the South Carolina primary made no difference in stopping Trump in 2016. Romney, now seen as anathema by wide swaths of the party, because he opposed Trump in 2016. He then, played a little game where he tried to accommodate marginally to Trump, and then he got himself elected to the Senate, seemingly for the sole purpose of voting to convict Trump in an impeachment trial. Okay, and then you have McCain, another former nominee of the party, who was like Trump's chief nemesis. So So the Republican allied media feeds that. They feed a sort of a hostility toward the Republican establishment, even if the way they sort of characterize the Republican establishment is sometimes off. Like, obviously, Mitch McConnell right now is the perfect embodiment of the Republican establishment, but they sort of have a reverential attitude toward him. So it's a little complicated, but I think broadly and thematically, it is the case that the Democrats are far more inclined to adulate their party leaders, and that makes collective action like this more possible because it's not seen as like this corrupt intervention for Democratic leaders to weigh in, consolidate. Obama put out what we're told is a signal that it's time to back Joe. And Obama is still the most influential person in the party, bar none. So his advice is going to be taken. Whereas if George W., came in and like issued a dictate in 2016, and it would have made no impact at all, or perhaps even backfired, which it did kind of. I mean, the fact that the Bush family was all in for Jeb created a backlash effect and sort of consolidated populist sentiment around Trump. You don't really have a close analog in the Democratic Party, which is why just the dynamics internally within the respective parties are much different. Now, the Bernie people are going to be outraged and incensed and probably, lose their minds if this establishment coalescence around Biden is effective. And they are not going to sit idly by when decrepit old Joe is shoved down their throats. But that sentiment is not widely distributed throughout the party. The party is still dominated by normie Dems. Normie Dems are who gave Joe Biden his smashing victory in South Carolina. So you're going to have a very exercised, probably minority in the party who are aligned with Bernie, just going balls to the wall in their opposition to what's happening. But it's relatively unlikely that will be as evenly distributed amongst the broad swath of the party as you might have seen in an analogous situation with the Republicans. So I mean, if some of these polling trends are to be believed, Biden is going to clean up. I mean, I shouldn't even predict this stuff because, I mean, we only have to wait a couple hours. But Biden, if you just kind of take the demographic composition of his win in South Carolina, assume that he's gone up a significant amount since South Carolina and can build on the demographic support that he had there, then North Carolina looks perfect for Biden. Alabama might even sweep there. Virginia, not quite the same demographically as South Carolina, but you got a lot of strategic voting in like Northern Virginia. So I could see the Pete and Amy people actively consolidating around Biden in Northern Virginia in particular. Tennessee, Arkansas, similar situation. Texas is sort of an open question still. A lot was made of Bernie's margin among Latino voters in Nevada, and he did have a huge margin there. But you have my sense is that those figures were inflated a bit because Nevada is a caucus state. So while Bernie definitely has made significant inroads among Latino voters, Bernie was always going to overperform in caucus states because it prioritizes or puts a premium on organizational capacity, and that's where he excels. He has a very motivated and dedicated activist organizing network. That's why in 2016, Bernie overperformed consistently in caucus states. But guess what? Between 2016 and 2020, many of the states that had previously done a caucus have switched to primaries. So after Iowa and Nevada, we're almost past any caucus states, with the exception of a small few, like I think the Dakotas, like American Samoa, and maybe a couple others that I'm missing, probably in the territories. But that's really it. And I don't think you're going to see anywhere near the same margins of victory for Bernie in some of these states that he won by a huge margin in 2016 that were caucus states. So today it's Minnesota, Maine, Colorado, and Utah. Am I missing one? Hold on. Yeah, those are the four. Those are the four that vote today that were caucus states last time. Um, so those states, kind of on paper, are well suited to Bernie, and it's likely that he'll probably win the majority of the plurality of votes there. But I don't see you're gonna see as astounding delegate margins in those states for him as you did in 2016. So that's something to bear in mind. Um, the other thing is, I remember that the polls in California in 2016 seemed to be closing in Bernie's favor. Remember, California voted almost at the end of the primary process in 2016. I think that should honestly still be the case, or at least again, California and Texas should not be voting on the same day. It's ridiculous. But the polls did seem to close for Bernie, where it looked like he had a chance to win California in 2016, but then Hillary ended up winning by, I think, 7 points. So I don't know what that tells us about 2020. Maybe enough of Bernie's early vote is already locked in California that some of these late shifts are not going to have as much of an impact there. But who knows? Yeah, it's just hard to say. So those are some initial thoughts. I would say if you're watching this and you haven't voted yet and you live in one of these states, simply vote for the person that you think is the best candidate. Don't try to play pundit and project what future election outcomes are gonna be in 8 months, or you try to say, oh, who has the best chance against Trump? You don't know. I don't know. We can sort of make inferences. We can try to be analytical about things, but nobody's got a crystal ball where they can look to see what's going to happen in November and have any degree of certainty, because who knows what's going to happen with the economy, this coronavirus stuff. Could be a foreign policy crisis. Could be a million other things. Maybe one of the candidates has a health problem. That's happened with Bernie already. Biden could. Who knows? So just vote for who you think is going to be the best candidate, and don't try to play pundit, because guess what? The pundits are almost, without exception, dead wrong about stuff. About the most consequential issues of the past number of years, they've been dead wrong, whether it was the election of Trump, whether it was the continued endurance of Bernie, whether it was Russiagate, whether it was impeachment, whether it was a million other things. They're just always wrong, because they live in this alternate universe that reliably warps their perceptions of reality. And that, by the way, that applies if there's a Biden supporter who happens to be watching this video, which I kind of doubt, but say there's one guy out there, if you think Biden would be the best president, okay, vote for him. But don't vote for him because you think that he's the best chance to win against Trump, because you don't know that. Vote for him if you think that he is genuinely the best candidate. And I say the same thing for any supporters of any candidate. I'm assuming that I have a disproportionate share of Tulsi voters. Look, vote for Tulsi then if you think she's the best candidate. That's my advice. Same for Bernie. Same for even Warren. So don't get involved in these little pundit games. They're just that. They're games. One interesting argument that Pete made when he was still in the race and he was going after Bernie in one of the debates was that Pete doesn't want to spend the general election explaining to voters why the Democratic nominee has kind words for Fidel Castro. Now, even characterizing what Bernie has said in relation to Castro as kind words or praise or whatever is a little misleading, because it's not like he ever personally championed Fidel Castro. He just pointed out the literacy rates improved after the Cuban Revolution, which is like sort of an irrelevant debate to be having, but that's what he said. But let's say Bernie has lavish praise on Fidel Castro. Okay, is that really more of a liability than having to spend the next 8 months litigating whether Biden's son, Hunter, ought to have been given a no-show job for a Ukrainian oil company or a Ukrainian energy company, where he got 80 plus $1,000 every month for doing nothing. Do you really want to spend day after day debating that liability? That seems a little worse than the Fidel Castro stuff. Fidel Castro is dead. The Democrat was going to have a difficult time winning Florida anyway. So, when you put it in that perspective, I think the calculations change somewhat. By the way, does anybody remember the impeachment stuff that we all endured? I remember it. I actually followed it pretty closely, even though it was extremely painful. And all that stuff is going to be resurrected in relation to Biden. He was at the center of the impeachment drama. And if you want to run around screaming that all the stuff that was produced in relation to Biden, Ukraine, and Hunter Biden, etc., if you want to say that all that was just the invention of GOP conspiracy theorists, I think you're in for a rude awakening, because most normal people can look at a no-show job given to an idiot son for 80 plus thousand while the father was vice president and engaging in Ukraine policy and say, you know what, that looks a little odd to me. It looks like it has the appearance of corruption, even if I can't necessarily articulate what exactly is corrupt about it. So that all is going to get rehashed ad nauseum if Biden is actually the nominee. So prepare for that. But, let's not get ahead of ourselves. The votes are being cast as we speak, and we shall see. So I'll do another one of these later tonight, and I'll talk to you then. Again, let me know in the comments if the phone stream is better in any way than the computer stream. All right, bye.